has to be done on the next sprint and stuff. But Scaled Agile, I think, is more towards, I've heard of like release buses and stuff, but I haven't got into deep into it. Yeah.
Hey, hi, good evening.
All right. Okay, release trains. Yeah, absolutely. So we can talk about that, Paul. Very good. Arts. So where are you joining from today, Thomas?
Hey, I'm joining from Singapore. If that is what you're asking.
It is. Okay. Are you working with Agile now?
Not using the Scaled Agile framework, but I'm interested in Scaled Agile, and my future work is going to be using Scaled Agile.
Okay, so you are planning to use it in the future then, coming up?
Yes, near future. Yeah.
Near future. How near is that?
Yes.
Like a few months, or is that?
Yeah, a couple of months from now.
Okay. Got it. Very good. We're going to just kind of do an Ask Me Anything format this month. So I'm a safe SPC. Sometimes we have other SPCs. We'll probably see which other ones join. So an SPC is a certified trainer on Scaled Agile, as well as implementing, bringing it in for organizations. I've done lots of organizations. So we'll just kind of talk through. We'll probably have some other people who have been practitioners, and they'll probably join in as well as we discuss. And we'll kind of talk about some of the questions you guys have, some of the new developments, things that have been happening with Scaled Agile. Obviously, we've had a lot of, change from COVID, where, things have become more remote now. So, obviously we have a lot more remote teams and things along those lines as well. And Paul and Thomas, what organization are you guys with? Do you guys want sharing that?
Let me go with that first. I'm with the Cognizant Technology Solutions Asia Pacific Limited. Currently working on a project for GovTech. GovTech is Government Technology Agency for Singapore.
Yeah, I know GovTech. Okay, great. And what organization, if you don't mind, Paul, are you working with?
I'm working in the banking industry, but mostly the applications that I'm dealing with is transforming a legacy monolith application into a set of microservices. So quite a big projects, but we're trying to use agile sprints to at least get it more into manageable phases.
Okay, got it. Nice. And welcome, Bob. Or are you where are you joining us from today?
Hi, good morning, good evening. I'm from the Philippines. So I work as Scrum Master.
Where did you say, Bob?
Yeah, I'm currently at the Philippines, and I'm a Scrum Master.
A Scrum Master from the Philippines, great.
Right.
Okay. All right, back a few years ago, did some classes over in the Philippines, pretty good. We did some in Makati and BGC, is it? Okay. Yeah. Are things more opened up now over there?
Yeah. It's more open up compared to previous year. So
okay, that's good.
we're starting to go to the office.
Okay. And you said you're Scrum Master role right now. Is that Scaled Agile, or is it more of a team level?
Yeah, it's Scaled
Agile, great.
Yeah.
Okay. And then are there any particular topics that are of interest to you that you'd like to discuss or talk about today that you kind of like to focus on?
Yeah, probably I'm interested about having the program backlog, getting it ready for PI planning. I'm interested in how other people are doing that, because one particular problem we encountered is that features are frequently changing until 1 week before PI planning. Sure how you handle that, or if some tips to get the backlog ready to get stakeholders aligned before PI planning.
Okay, Sounds good. We can definitely talk about that. And I'm going to just send this off for folks. And so let me start talking about some of those topics. I'm sure I've started recording. By the way, I see that, Paul, you said task prioritization from backlogs. We usually do at the start of the sprint. Are you responding to Bob's comment there, Paul?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it can be daunting if, especially if there are lots of items, because let's say clients and users will have all their wishes and requests, and you'll end up with a pile of mountain of backlogs. But at the end of the day, we only have very limited time. So yeah, so we usually just take a set of them that we can do in 2 weeks time, and then take the same exercise after 2 weeks.
So at the team level, that is true, Bob. That would be basically the way that you would do it. From a Scaled Agile perspective, when we're talking about kind of the larger context where it's the whole release train, I think somebody asked about the Agile release train. Paul, you asked about that. So an Agile release train is a team of teams, right? It's going to be at least probably 25 people, probably up to be up to like 125 people. So you're probably going to have like 5, 7, 10 teams there, right? So they're all going to do that planning. They're all going to prioritize. They're going to have their own Scrum Master, and then there's a release train engineer. I'm actually going to pull up the diagram. Give me a second here. Have you guys seen the Scaled Agile big picture before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull it up. It might be sometimes a little intimidating, but bear with me, and let's see if we can take a look at it here. Okay, give me one moment. Let me just pull it up on the screen here. Elizabeth, I'm going to give you co-hosts to be able to let people in, and also please keep an eye out for that Zoom bomber. Okay, so if that guy comes in, please remove that person. Unfortunately, we've been having problems in Zoom meetings. I don't know if it's happened to you guys. We had last month, we had somebody who kept on coming in and trying to disrupt the meeting and put up like all kinds of weird stuff on the screen. And so I guess we're going to try to watch out for that this time. I think the mistake was that we shared the link. 13 chat that we'll see. I think the mistake was that we actually shared the Zoom link, just for everybody. And so I guess we're getting a lot more of that kind of thing where people go into Zoom meetings and do that. So we'll be watching out for that. Elizabeth, you can help me to do that. Okay. All right, let's take a look here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Actually, we have another person coming in, so let them introduce themselves. Love 13 Chapter Bridge. Can you introduce yourself? Are you there?
That's actually Patience. Her name is Patience. I mean Peace.
That's Peace.
Yeah, that's Peace.
Okay. Peace, are you able to introduce yourself, or is your microphone working? Okay, there's the name, Peace. Okay, Peace, well, I guess if your microphone is working later, go ahead and feel free to jump in and introduce yourself. Let me pull up my screen here. I think I have this Scaled Agile big picture, and we'll take a look going to your question, Bob, and Paul, the question that you were asking. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yes, it's visible. Yeah.
Okay, so in the Scaled Agile big picture, and this is kind of like the main view, the portfolio view, you can see, I actually want to go to, let's go to full. It's probably gonna take the whole screen up, but okay. So down here, Bob, this is where we have our teams, right? So we should see our Scrum Master, which is your role,
Yeah.
right? And you see our teams, and we see the product owner there. And these, you're gonna probably have, like I said, anywhere from like 3, 5, 7, 10 of these on this, right? Okay, on that, where they're all going to do their own planning every sprint or iteration, right? But at the same time, you're also going to have up here, you can see the release train engineer. Have you heard of that before, Bob? I think you're muted, Bob. So
yeah, I was on mute. Yeah.
Yep. So have you heard of the release train engineer before?
Yeah, and actually that I performed that role on some capacity
Okay, so you
With-
guys are actually implementing Scaled Agile now. You're using it.
Right,
here.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the release train engineer is the role basically that is like the super scrum master, and you know that.
Mhm,
Sounds like you're playing that role. So basically, the release train engineer is going to be the person that is going to do all of the, working with all the scrum masters, working with the teams, making sure that they're ready for not only the, their own sprint planning, but also PI planning, right?
mhm.
So PI planning is kind of the planning for the entire, basically the next 5, 6 iterations. You can see here, I think we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And they're going to basically prepare the backlog prior over here. They're going to work with the business owners. They're going to work with the product management, and then they're going to prepare that backlog. The architect will also have input into that, but it's really going to be facilitated by the person playing your role, the release train engineer. Right, so that person will be the one. What is PI? Oh, sorry, Paul. PI stands for program increment, right? So the PI or program increment is basically you can see this gray one here, and then we have another one here. Usually every 5 or 6, could be 4, but usually 5 or 6 sprints or iterations. And the iterations are always 2 weeks, usually in Scaled Agile, right? So PI is a program increment, okay? And that's like the basic unit of kind of planning that we work around in Scaled Agile. Does that answer your question, Paul, on that?
Yeah, so it's like around 5 to 6 sprints or something, just clubbing it, or
that's exactly right. Yeah. So the PI is basically the planning kind of cadence that we work on in Scaled Agile, and then you're going to have basically the backlog preparation is going to happen at the whole release train. A release train is that team of teams, right? Like we said, 5, 7, 10 teams, up to 125 people roughly. And that is going to be the planning that's going to going into PI planning. Now, once you come out of that PI planning, program increment planning, every one of the teams is actually going to do their own backlog, right? They're for each one of their own sprints and iterations, and the Scrum Master for that team is going to facilitate that. Okay, does that make sense, Bob?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Paul, did you have more of a question about the PI? Does that make sense what a PI, a program increment is? It's kind of just think of it at the next level up of what a sprint is, but we're going up one level. So now we're actually dealing with our entire, we call it release train, and it's at a longer period of time. So basically 10 to 12 weeks instead of 2 weeks, which is the team level planning frequency or cadence. Does that make sense, Paul, on that? Okay, great. And then Bob, did you have more on the preparing for backlog and PI planning, more specifically from a Scaled Agile perspective, questions about that?
Yeah, it's more on a Scale Agile perspective, because we do this prioritization meeting, like the WISTRIP sessions 1 and 2, and still a lot of changes happen because of driving some products getting released. So the problem, I guess, is that the features are not ready, or there's not enough understanding of the features when it goes into the PI planning. And so the plan is kind of hard to execute, and the predictability is getting affected. Although we're maintaining the 80 to 100 band, we're on the 80-ish part as a train because of the frequent changes or late changes in the backlog. So some complexities are not factored in during the PI planning and stuff.
Do all of your teams have Scrum Masters, Bob?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. How many teams do you guys have on the release train?
We have 5. So we have 3 Scrum Masters. So 2 of us are handling 2 teams, and another Scrum Master handling 1 team.
Okay, good. And let me take a look. So Paul, you asked about the value from safe practices. And also I think you asked about task prioritization. So The value from SAFe, it really is, if you guys, have you guys heard of Shuhari before? In an Agile context, anybody ever heard of that? Shuhari?
Yeah, I think I've heard it before. I just can't remember.
So it's kind of like in martial arts, Aikido particularly, there's this idea that first you learn the rule and then you kind of start to adapt the rule and then you become a master of that rule, right? So that's Shuhanri. Basically, Scaled Agile is a great shoe or starting point, because a lot of people say, oh, very prescriptive. It tells you exactly what to do. But the key with Scaled Agile, it really gets your entire enterprise moving and being able to use Agile at large scale. But you should continue to evolve and adapt over time, right? So the value is that, and I mean, I've been in the Agile space for, wow, whatever, 15 years or something like that, okay? So it is very hard to do enterprise kind of use of Agile. In one team, like a Scrum Master, you got a team, it's pretty easy, to kind of just follow like Scrum and follow those practices. But when you start talking about, look, I've got 10 teams, I've got, a couple of programs, I've got, 20 teams, it becomes very hard, right? And I'm sure, Bob, you know that because you're using Scaled Agile, it's difficult. So this gives you a good shoe or a good starting point where you can kind of start to use, and start to be able to really adapt and work with using, an approach. Now, does that mean this is the be all and end all and you will never, ever again in the future, make any adjustments? Obviously, that's not true, right? You're going to make adjustments, you're going to adapt it. And as you continue to practice in your organization, you're going to get better and you're going to be able to then do better with it. However, basically from the starting point, Scaled Agile gives you a lot of value in that side, right? And I see we just had Jenna join. Jenna, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself, where you're joining from? You able to unmute, Jenna?
Hello, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, hi. Janardhan from Singapore.
Hi.
Hi. I work as a managing consultant and interested in finding out more about Agile and SAFe. So that's the reason why I joined this call.
Okay. Are you implementing or using Scaled Agile right now, or are you kind of just new to it right now?
Not pure Agile, but mostly hybrid.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
Okay. Hybrid Agile. Got it. Are you able to say what organization or company you work with?
I'm working with Entity Data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So I think from a consulting perspective, I've done a lot of consulting in the past, myself working in consulting companies. It can sometimes be a little bit tricky, and we can talk about that more, because often consulting organizations have their own framework or approach they use for delivery.
Right.
And then it's a little tricky because then you got to try to bring that together with the Agile part, right? So now you kind of bring your own framework, but then you're also trying to incorporate agility. And sometimes that can be a big trick or a little tricky for consulting organizations, right? But we can talk about that and address kind of questions you have. Seen a lot of that over the years. Sometimes it goes okay, sometimes it doesn't go so well, but definitely that is something that we can talk through. So
sure. Yeah.
We were talking, Paul, about the value from SAFe and practices. Does that kind of address some of the value, kind of being able to get that shoe, that starting point, without having to go through and build everything yourself?
Yeah. In a way, when I think about the Scale Agile, maybe it is this is for maybe some very big projects where a lot of teams are delivering their sort of let's say software deliverables that are sometimes quite dependent with each other. So the other one deliverable you cannot release to production independently, and it needs the other like maybe other deliverables to be there. That's why maybe it needs to be coordinated by release trains or something like that. But but I mean it's easier at the low scale because you have more control. But when let's say you're dependent on another team's deliverable, and that deliverable gets delayed, then you cannot, even you're finished, you cannot really release your stuff to production, but you have another like pending backlog items that you need to implement. So it's like you want to release something, but you you cannot because other teams hasn't released yet, so it stays in your um UAT, but you keep adding more to your UAT stack. So yeah, maybe there's some tricks there to like manage them at the large scale perhaps, but I haven't like uh, figure out the maybe the tips and tricks maybe people here can share.
Okay. So if other people have comments or thoughts about your use of Scaled Agile, or you want to kind of comment, respond, kind of open discussion, obviously it's Ask Me Anything, an open discussion. Anybody who wants to, talk about that, feel free just to go ahead and kind of respond and talk about it. If you have experience, kind of the value that you've seen from Scaled Agile, your experience using Agile release trains. Does anybody, I know Bob, you guys have an Agile release train with 5 teams. Is anybody else using currently a Scaled Agile and Art and Agile release train in their organization? Is there anybody else who's already using, or is everybody else kind of just learning and starting out? I think, Thomas, you said that you're kind of using Agile, but not Scaled Agile yet, right?
Yes, John. The current project that I'm working on is using less rather than safe.
Yeah.
So here the approach is different, though it is a large scale project. I would say it's a product development. They're using less. But as I mentioned, in a couple of months, I'll be joining another project, which is going to be an enterprise-wide implementation, which will be adopting SAFe. Yeah, so that's when I started studying about it, and yeah, I think just to continue from where Paul was talking about the release, depending on other teams, coming in. The whole thing, I think, works based on what has been planned for the program increment and what is prioritized, right? And what each team has chosen for their backlog. And as they progress, it is purely release on demand. Whenever a particular part of the system is required in the production, then they coordinate and release. This is what I understand from the whole picture. So though there is dependency, only when everything is ready and only when it is required in production, the release is made. That's an on-demand release, right? So it's a continuous cycle of Scrum or XP, whichever is the approach that is being used. The release train is going to continuously integrate and do the deployment. It has to be what do I say, coordinated well in that manner. Yeah. So every team produces whatever is taken as their part of the increment. This is my high-level understanding, right? So when I go into practical implementation, I think I will have more questions to probe and learn from experts like you. Yeah.
And I think that one of the topics that was brought up, Thomas, you talked about less versus Scaled Agile. Maybe I'll give a quick comparison of the two. For those of you who are not aware of, less is a large-scale Scrum. It's another kind of competing framework. I think the most popular ones, Scaled Agile, of course, and then a lot of people use Spotify, which is not really a framework, but people like to use Spotify as an approach. and you'll see that. But large scale Scrum, effectively, it is just that. It is basically using Scrum only at large scale. The big difference is if you look at the big picture, hopefully you guys can see the big picture on my screen here. You're going to see that there are Kanbans as well as Scrum. You're going to see that there are lean principles that are being used, right? Lean flow principles. For those of you familiar with like the Toyota, manufacturing lean principles, lean Kanban, right? All of those things are part of Scaled Agile, where large scale Scrum is only Scrum, right? So you basically take Scrum up to a higher level in the organization, but it's focused only on using Scrum, where Scaled Agile is using, they call it a lean Agile approach, right? So it's using Agile, it's using Scrum, you have Scrum teams, but you also have, Kanban, lean, XP. So all of these different principles are really, it's more, I guess you might call it a hybrid of these things, where large scale Scrum is purely Scrum, right? So that's the real big difference between the two. I'm kind of, I've used many different approaches over the years. If you've looked at my blogs and things like that, you'll see I've done blogs comparing all kinds of different scaling methods on my YouTube channel. If you just look at John Okoro, or I think Agile Scaling Tour on YouTube, you'll find a lot of those. So we go through comparing SAFe and less, and Spotify, and comparing all the different approaches people are using, right? Nexus. There've been quite a few different scaling approaches for Agile, but Scaled Agile has really become probably the most popular. And I think that one of the reasons it's become so popular is because, it really is something organizations can use. On the one hand, people kind of say, well, it's very prescriptive. It's a very, you got a lot of set things you have to do. And I agree, there are a lot of things in there, but that also is one of the reasons why enterprises like it, is because they know, okay, I need a release train engineer, I need Scrum teams, I need a product owner and product manager, and I know what I need to do. Now that goes back to what you were saying, Jenna, on the consulting, right? It's definitely possible to overdo it, where you kind of like just get like way too much stuff in there, and you spend all your time kind of just putting in a bunch of different roles. So you have to be careful of that. But it is good that at least you have that starting point. And obviously it's a different starting point from less. I haven't looked at the adoption lately. I used to look at the State of Agile survey, but I haven't done that in the last year. But the State of Agile survey would usually give kind of the percentages. I know that SAFe is a leading. I don't know what percentage of organizations are using less now. Do you know what that is, Thomas? By any chance?
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
You said you do know what percentage of organizations are using less?
I'm not sure of that. I don't know. I don't have the numbers with me. No idea.
A good place to look. Usually there's I think it's a version 1 State of Agile survey. And usually they'll tell you every year what the percentages, I've got to take a look at that myself, what the percentages are for organizations that are using different methods. So that's usually pretty interesting. They'll tell you what techniques people are using. Are they using Scrum XP? Are they using Kanbans? What tools are they using? Are they using Jira? Are they using, whatever it is, right? LabNet. So you get a really good perspective on what organizations are using. What I found in recent times, usually SAFe is usually kind of like the top one, followed by Spotify. Does anybody know what Spotify? The music streaming. Yeah, it's that company. So they actually, some years ago, they came up with an Agile approach, and it became really popular. It got used by like ING Netherlands in Europe, and a lot of companies, a lot of consultancies like to use it as well. I think McKinsey, et cetera, right? They like to apply this basically as their large scale Agile approach. Now, Spotify was never really meant to be a scaling approach for other companies. It really was only meant for their company. In fact, I knew one of the guys there, and when we used to do a lot of live conferences, and his name escapes me now, but he actually started using SAFe, I believe, over time, because he felt that was going to be a good approach for him. Where in the past, a lot of organizations really would use Spotify. So the reason they like it is that it's kind of like a kind of very loosely defined approach, and you can kind of apply your own business agility to it. The downside is it's really not a defined framework or approach, meaning that, you know, it's pretty loose and you kind of figure out what you're going to do. Obviously, a lot of consultants get paid quite a lot for, you know, applying those Spotify approaches, but, you know, definitely not really designed to be a scaling framework except for that company. So yeah, Paul, definitely the music streaming company, Spotify, that's the one. And I don't know how much they've adapted it now because over Nyberg is his name, I think Nyberg. Over the years, they have kind of adapted just like any company should, right? Okay, so we had, okay, Richard, welcome. Let's see what other questions we had. So Thomas, you talked about using Agile, not Scaled Agile. Did you have other questions about the differences between kind of a, I guess, a Agile or less, or to compare to a Scaled Agile or safe? Thomas?
Nothing. Nothing that in the current work, you know, I need to you know, differentiate them because Scaled Agile is not in the purview at all. So as I mentioned, the new project that I'm going to get into is totally a different organization. So maybe you know, for myself to have an understanding, because I've been working in the less space. When I go into safe space, you know, how I should prepare and myself as a from mindset point of view, and how I should, you know, you know, as I said, yeah, prepare myself to, you know, face the safe, you know, environment. That is the only question I have.
So how to prepare yourself for Scaled Agile?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question as well. Let me see if I can move this down. Okay, so if you take a look at, on the Scaled Agile framework, you're going to find safe training here, right? And we actually deliver safe training as well. Not sure where that came from. All right, I'm not sure where I got that from. Let me see if I can get rid of it. But basically, when you have certifications, right? So that's why I say there's more of an approach with Scaled Agile where you're able to go through, you can look at the different certifications. Usually people will take the one that's called Leading Safe. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, see if I can get rid of that on my screen. I'm not sure what that is. Anyway, there are different certifications that you can take. And the one that you usually want to start with is the one that we call Leading Safe. Okay, so Leading Safe or Leading Scaled Agile Framework is the one that allows you to kind of get an overview of everything. And then if you want to go further and you want to learn more about, so you get a certification called Safe Agile certification. You can do that in a public class, you can do it in a private class, or my company does private classes, but there are public classes you can look at on the website. You can find public classes as well. So if you're like one person wants to go, usually private classes are good if you want to have like a whole team, like 5, 7, 10, 12 people come together, then you do your own private class. But if you want to do a public one, you just go to the ones that you can find. A lot of them are done online now. Any tips on getting better time estimates? Okay, so, but the certification is usually the place that you want to start. And let's see if we can see the different ones there. They should be here. Certify. So the more advanced certification is what we call the Safe SPC. I'd like to see if I can give you the whole list of certifications here. See if I can find it. Move it around a little bit. So there is what we call, here we go, Safe Agilist. This one is usually the one that people will take to start. Let's say you're a consultant, you're, you know, Scrum Master, whatever it is, you're going to start out. Usually you want to put your team and as many people on your team as possible so they understand the approach. And then there's an exam at the end of that certification. Usually this used to be a 2-day. Online, I often teach as a 3-day certification class. Okay. You take the exam, and then once you've taken that and you pass it, you become a Safe Agilist in the SA certification. And then there are other specialized certifications. For instance, if you're involved in government, there's a Safe Government one. Some of the people use that, especially the US government uses that a lot. I don't think Singapore government has used it as much at this point. There's product owner, product manager. There is safe practitioner for teams. And then SPC, as I told you, I'm an SPC and SPC co-trainer. If you want to go further, you want to be able to train and certify people in your own organization, this is the one you want to do. This is basically a week class, right? So, and it's a lot more intense, it's a lot harder. Usually you want to have some Agile background before you start this one. And then that's going to be, like I said, in class. It's either 4 days online. It can be 5 full days or most of 5 days. And then you're going to have a more intensive exam than the other ones. And then the highest level certification is the SPCT, like Gerald, who was on with us last month. He's one of your SPCTs over here in Singapore. And that is like the highest level trainer certification. And they are able to train all of the different certifications, including this one. Okay, but you always want to start with the training. I think, Thomas, is your question. You want to start with the training because what happens in certification is that if you don't, you end up with people not knowing what you're doing, right? So let's say, Bob, you know, you have, I don't know, how many people, Bob, on your, how many people trained in your organization? How many people certified? Did any?
I'm not sure how many certified, but we're all trained, I guess, from the vice president until the developers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the management team are trained as safe agilists. The developers are trained as safe agilist, safe as well. I say practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
The master we all undergot the safe advanced Scrum Master certification.
Oh, that's safe against Scrum Master. Okay. So, and I think that's SASM is probably over there. Yep. So the reason the certification is really important, Thomas, is that it gets everybody at a good starting point, right? One of the success factors when you start using Scaled Agile is really, you know, how much of their release train is actually certified and trained on how to use it. Just looking at the website is unfortunately usually not enough. So you want to get that certification as a starting point, and then from there you're able to start advancing and using it in the organization a little better. Okay, does that answer that question about the training?
Yeah. Yes, thanks, John.
Okay. And you can find all that on the Scaled Agile site here. My organization and many others also offer certifications, so you can just find a training provider, and that's a way to start. Paul, you said, if anyone has tips on getting better time estimates on large-scale migration projects and how to decompose them into training, PIs, and sprints, especially when various teams are involved. Okay, so Paul, do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Are you just talking, usually that's something we do as we're getting ready for PI planning, which is program increment planning. Is there specific, have you, let's see.
Because let's say if it's like it's not really a greenfield project, but there's like a legacy application that you need to sort of plan on evolving into a new platform or architecture. But getting to that end state of that architecture would involve a lot of tasks and softwares that needs to be developed and needs to involve different teams. On a high level, if I just like plan it in like waterfall, then you'd end up like what you call this, like the months will be like, I mean, you can decompose it maybe into like various high level what you call this, work items, like how you do it in the traditional project plan, which might end up like a year or so. But if we want to adapt it in a sort of agile approach, perhaps some of them can be done in like sort of cycles and stuff. But I'm interested in the perspective of Scaled Agile on how this usual task is getting worked on. Is there like a traditional, a usual thought process that Scaled Agile practitioners start with? What's the sort of a mantra in terms of attacking this humongous starting point?
Yeah, so you definitely don't want to do waterfall. That's something I say is a no-no, right? You want to avoid using the waterfall. You know, okay, first we do, you know, design, build, test, you know, 6 months of requirements. That is definitely not what you want to do. Scaled Agile does give you an approach. Let's go back over to the big picture here. Let me go back a few. Give me a moment. Okay. So if you look at that Scaled Agile big picture, if you can see right when we start, we have what's called a team and we have a program backlog, okay? And that program backlog is where we start breaking down stories and we start breaking down at the next level up, right? So we're going through all of our different items on the backlog. If we look at the program backlog, I'll just click on it here. All right, so you're going to see you're going to have non-functional requirements. You're going to have different things that can go into that. And you're going to have all of these items. You have features that go into the backlog. At each level, features break down into stories, and you have what we call epics at the higher level. So you go through and you do that, but you do it the same way you would do in Scrum, right? Which is you put them into the backlog, and then you put them into your planning as you go into planning. So what you don't want to do is kind of like a 6-month requirements phase. That's something that you would not want to do. I mean, from any Agile perspective, but certainly not from Scaled Agile. But what you do want to do is you want to prepare your backlog. And then when you prepare your backlog, you're going to bring that into your PI planning, which is we talked about that like quarterly planning cycle. And you're going to bring it in, and all the different teams are going to break down those features and stories, and they're going to do their planning based on that. And so you can do a lot more detail can go into it, et cetera. But the bottom line is that you want to stay far away from waterfall, or what we call water scrum fall, right? Which is where you do, hey, let's do 6 months of requirements, and then we'll do some sprints, and then we'll do 3 months of UAT. That's something you don't want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that means you need to target like maybe the first release train to be like a sort of MVP-ish kind of thing, not the full scale. It's like but eventually you want to evolve into the final state of the architecture, right? It's just that you won't be able to arrive there on day one, perhaps if it's too big.
You won't arrive on day one. That's true, right? You're going to iterate, because in Agile methods, we iterate. It's iterative and incremental. I mean, you're always building on, you're always adding more, right? So iterative and incremental, right? So you won't start from day one. One of the things I like about Scaled Agile, in a previous life, I was an architect, right? So you see that architecture runway there. I like that Scaled Agile actually does do the architectural pieces, but you can see what it does. Let me see if we can click on that. It actually builds the architecture as we go. We call it architecture runway. And you'll see that's actually getting built out by these non-functional red ones. So you have a lot of non-functional stories and features, architectural, that are actually going to build what we call the architecture runway. So you might need to add, single sign-on, or you might need to add certain security. You might need to add, different services or APIs, and that is being built in the architecture runway. So I like Scaled Agile. I don't know if Less has that, but one of the things I really like in Scaled Agile is that there is a architecture is kind of a first-class thing, and it's actually thought of from the beginning, right? So I do like that, and you'll see that architecture runway here. And we do think about that, but no, you're not going to have, back to your question there, well, you're not going to have all of the architecture. I mean, I remember doing architecture, in traditional projects, and we would spend like 6 months architecting to the point that everybody just started programming because they couldn't wait anymore. So we're not going to do that, but we are going to be iterative and incremental. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're kind of building it as you go.
Yeah.
And that there's a course called Safe for Architects. I think probably one of the most challenging courses I've ever taught, and taken and taught, because that one really goes deep into architecture. So if you're really interested, that would be the certification to take, the Safe for Architects. If you really, or you have people who are in your team who are architects and want to understand more deeply how to do that.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Other questions or comments or other things you guys want to bring in? As we said, this is kind of a open discussion. Ask me anything for this meetup. Feel free to, bring up anything you would like, anything you want to discuss, questions that you have on the big picture on implementing SAFe, comparing it to other approaches, roles, anything like that, or anything else.
John, Janardhan here.
Mhm.
One question on the certifications. How does a SAFe certification compare with a bunch of certifications that PMI provides?
That's a great question, Jana. I think probably about 10 years ago, PMI was probably the leading certification, kind of if you're going to be like in IT and technology projects or any kind of projects, right? Now, I think Agile has really become a leading way. You know, we're kind of entering the fourth industrial revolution, as it's called, right? We have a lot of more digital transformation taking place, and Agile is really becoming the normal way of working. And Scaled Agile is the leading certification. So, I mean, from a career perspective, just, I mean, I've benefited greatly over the years from having this certification. A lot of organizations look for people that have this certification just because, I guess for HR and for others, it means, hey, you understand Agile at a higher level, enterprise level, right? PMI does have the PMI ACP. I haven't checked that in a while, but they're Agile certified practitioner, but it's not really their own framework or anything. It basically is just like a comparison. You look at different frameworks of Agile, and then you kind of take a test on that. There's a lot of reading, but I don't think that that would be the way that I would personally start if I was starting to learn about enterprise Agile. I think I would definitely go the safe route in terms of certification personally. Now, if I was going to do more traditional project management, yeah, I mean, PMI is well recognized for traditional projects. Maybe I'd do like a action project or something. But if you're going to be, especially in technology, but also just generally speaking, you know, dealing with more adaptive things, which we need to today, I think Scaled Agile is definitely the way to go for that.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, comments, items you guys want to talk about? We can also look at, one of the good things you can look at here on the Scaled Agile site, you see my screen, you can always see what's new. So you can see, like, we have the Scaled Agile with AI, I believe, the Scaled Agile for big data and data ops. You can also see all the new features and topics that are being added into the framework. So all of those are always right down here at the bottom. I looked through this for release train engineers. You might find that interesting, Bob. They just had a conference for release train engineers. And, you know, they usually do these virtually, and I think we're doing them in person as well again now too. So you can take a look at some of the latest items that have come up from Scaled Agile just by going to the bottom of scaledagileFramework.com. Look at what's new and safe. Look at the recent blog posts. There's one on cloud that I thought was, some people might find interesting if you're kind of oriented to doing like the consulting and that kind of thing. So I think, Jenna, that was a kind of your space. You might find this one interesting about the cloud, etc. So take a look at the bottom there and find that. And also log in to scaledagileFramework.com, create a login. You have a community login, it's called. And when you do that, you can actually get more resources and things as well if you join for that part of it. Got recommendation on books, you said, for Scaled Agile overview. There is one that's like a pseudo fiction one called The Rollout. I forgot who wrote that now. But The Rollout is by one of the Scaled Agile fellows. And basically that gives you like a look at kind of a fictional company implementing Scaled Agile and all the challenges and stuff. I think that'd be a good book to read if you want to read a book on Scaled Agile. Obviously go through the site itself, the knowledge base, the big picture and everything, right? So that would be something that's really good to go through. The Phoenix Project, yeah, it was like the Phoenix Project, exactly. So the Rollout is basically like the Scaled Agile, yeah, that's the one, the Rollout. I'll type it. I have to look at who the author was on that, but it's called The Rollout, yeah. So it is very much like the Phoenix Project. If you like that book, you'll really probably like the Rollout as well for Scaled Agile. And it basically just walks through kind of like all the challenges and pains of everything of a company trying to, you know, implement and put Scaled Agile in place. Okay, so yeah, that's a good one. And then, I mean, obviously you can read more general. There are general topics as well. I think there's a Scaled Agile. I think there's a distilled book on Scaled Agile Distilled, Safe Distilled. I'm not sure if they've updated that to the latest version, but that's like a quick starter as well that you can take a look at. Okay. Other questions, items, let's see what else we had here. So Bob, I'm curious, in the Philippines, is there a lot of Scaled Agile being used now that you've seen? I know it was kind of starting out before we had COVID, we were starting to see more. Is there a lot of Scaled Agile over there now?
I'm not sure, but I guess it's pretty much more compared to like 2 years before. But yeah, typically at least when I look into the job offerings, typically basic Scrum and basic Agile is applied, so there is much less application on a larger scale. Probably for those that the companies are foreign based, like from the US or from the from Australia. Those are those who are implementing Scaled Agile
Right.
in here in the Philippines.
Okay, got it. Good. All right. Other questions or comments or things you guys want to know about from Scaled Agile perspective? I know quite a few of you are new, so if you want to, you have basic questions, that's what we're here to discuss and talk about. So feel free to do that. Peace. I'm not sure if your thing started working, your speaker microphone. Thomas, hi John. I have to sign off now. No problem. Thanks for joining us, Thomas, and hopefully you got something out of today's session and work for you. Peace, is your microphone working? Go ahead.
Thanks, and good night, John.
Yep.
Thanks for the great answers for all the questions. It's a great
Absolutely.
learning. We'll be joining your future sessions also. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Thomas.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Peace, are you there? Is your microphone working now?
Yes, microphone is working.
Hi. Great. Anything that you had, questions, anything you want to learn about from today's session?
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I listened in mostly, because I'm relatively new, and I'm looking forward to taking some trainings with you. I've already started speaking with Elizabeth concerning that, to get some of my colleagues or friends on board as well.
Okay, great. Okay, well, if any other questions or anything, please bring them up. That's what we have these sessions for today. Anything else folks would like to talk about or questions? Anything at all?
Well, no, I learned that, like I said, I listened a lot. So some of the questions in my heart were actually asked. And so I've learned a few stuff today. And today was quite more interesting than the last, I must say. I learned a lot.
Okay, great. Glad you enjoyed it and glad you learned something from the session. Good, Bob or Paul, obviously Richard, Wendy, anybody else have questions? Elizabeth, anybody else have, and Jenna, anybody else have anything as we, I guess, otherwise we'll start to wrap up for the day and for this month's session. But is there anything else you guys would like to ask or talk about from a Scaled Agile or General Agile perspective or anything like that?
Yeah, probably one for me, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing that probably I have not seen much where we're doing is measuring, because I know we measure the business value right after a program increment. So, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we released the product. So, how do we tie that? Because there is this value, right, that we should measure the value we're bringing out every program increment. So I'm just curious, how do we measure those value?
Okay, so business value, that's a great question, right? So what happens is if you look at the features that we have, let me see if I can open a feature up for you. Okay, an enabler feature. If we open up a feature here, let's take a look at it on the site. You're going to see that features actually have something. There should be like a little template in here. It actually has what we call a business value is not associated with it. So we assign business value to that feature. And when I say we, I actually mean that is the product, the business owners. So when we look at the bigger picture here, we're going to have business owners, and this should not be like the team says, oh, I think this is valuable, right? Here's an example. Let's say we're doing an online bookstore, old example, but you're doing an online bookstore. I'm trying to compete with Amazon, maybe a bit late for that now. And the team, someone's like, hey, how important is it to be able to search, do custom searches for books? And maybe the team thinks that's super important, custom searching. But then you go and talk to your business owners, right? Your business owners are like, look, we just need a basic search. We don't need anything fancy. We really want you just to have a good variety of books and it's fast, right? So they're going to say, the business value, they usually score on a scale of 1 to 10, could be 0, right? So they might say that's like, having custom searching is like 2. We don't really care about that. Now the team, if they hadn't had the business owners come in, they might have said, oh, you know what? We really think it's so important to do custom searching, but you always have to talk to the business owners, which are the people who face your customer, right? And that is what we talk about, customer centricity. So the business value is usually assigned, it's an actual number, and it's assigned by business owners. Usually we do that during our PI planning when we're doing our planning for each quarter, the next 5 or 6 iterations and sprints, that is when we do the business value. Does that answer that query, Bobby? You might have more on that one.
Yeah, it is. The business value is used, right, to give direction to the team on the business perspective. Yeah, but for example, how do we measure whether a feature that we released has been usable to the customer or has great value for the end users?
So the value at the end, so at the beginning of the PI, the planning in the beginning, right? They're going to prioritize. The business owners are going to say, hey, you know, I think this is this important. I think this is that important. They're going to go through that. At the end, they will go through and give an actual business value when we finish that PI, right? That, you know, 5, 6 iterations. And they're going to say, okay, here's the actual business value. I thought it was a 10, but it turns out this is like a 3 because nobody used that feature, right? So they're going to update it at the end of the PI, the program increment. And that, again, is the business owners who are doing that. But they are going to base it on what the real results were from using those features, or what they see, you know, being demonstrated as it's deployed and used by real people and real users, right?
Right. So I guess the actual business value is not based on what was completed by the team, right? It's
by how the users are actually using it and customers are using it.
Right. Okay, got it. I think that answered my question. Thanks.
Great.
John.
Very good. Okay, cool. Paul, you're good. Jenna, anything else? Or Wendy, Richard, anybody else have any other
Nothing
questions?
for now, John. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Nothing for now, John. Yeah.
Okay, good, great. All right, great. Wendy, you've linked in there. Okay, so you can find us for my team. We do the private classes, and that's us, which is Agile and Blockchain. You can find us on LinkedIn and on the website there as well. Okay, so it sounds like we are good. Everybody's kind of gotten hopefully some questions answered, and, you know, invite others, let them know, you know, we do this each month for people who are new, people who are, you know, continuing implementations and want to learn more. And we look forward to you guys joining us for the next one. You can catch us in the comments there if you want to follow up with me, with my team, and you're interested in doing like private classes, implementation, that sort of thing. Happy to support you on that as well. And I think that's it for this one, guys. So everyone, thanks a lot. And we'll talk to you again in our next session coming up next month.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.